Hi, Michael Brown here. Today's video, I want to talk about common mistakes people who are new to lenticular printing make, something that happens to many beginners. There are about 6 of them, and let's go through them one by one. The first mistake is having unrealistic expectations on what you can achieve by printing lenticulars yourself with home, desktop, inkjet printers. Uh, People have seen lenticulars over the years. Here's an interesting example. And I'll actually do a little close-up of that so you can see. This is a lenticular made from a video clip, and it was recorded on high-resolution photographic film, transparency film, and then mounted to the lenticular sheet. This is an example of a Kodak depth imaging print from probably 20 years ago. You can't achieve that type of quality with home inkjet printers and commonly available lenticular sheets. Inkjet printers have less resolution and less accuracy in their dot placement. So when you see some of these fantastic examples that were done on high volume litho presses that maybe cost, $1 million plus, you have to understand you won't be able to achieve that at home. But that's not to say you can't achieve terrific results at home, because you can. Desktop inkjet printer technology is pretty well proven for making lenticular prints. So to begin with, have the right expectations as far as what you can make with a home printer. So the second mistake I see people make is purchasing the wrong lenticular sheets. Now, lenticular sheets are hard to find, right? So often you're on Amazon or eBay and you're looking for sheets, and you'll find something that might be a sheet 75 LPI, and it looks inexpensive, and so you buy some and you quickly get frustrated. These lenticular sheets are made with all different characteristics. Something I would say as a general rule of thumb is, if your sheet does this, you can bend it easily, it's probably not going to be the right sheet for home inkjet printing. So this is a very flexible sheet, and these are the type that are used on litho printing presses. The one I just had was a 60 LPI animation sheet. Now here's a 40 LPI sheet. You can see that bends not as easily, but it still bends. This again is a litho sheet. The Chinese, I like the way they refer to those as sheets in this thicker material. This is also 40 LPI, but it's much harder to bend, and it's a much thicker sheet if we go on edge like that. And then you can go even thicker. This is a 10 LPI sheet. I mean, there's no way I can really bend that. It's very hard and durable. So it's often easy to find litho or thin lenticular sheets on eBay or Amazon, but that's probably not what you want to start with. Now, there are two main types of sheets: sheets for animation or flips, and sheets for 3 dimensions. And they vary in their viewing angles. The animation sheets have a wider viewing angle, typically 50 degrees or so, and the 3D sheets have a narrower view angle, typically 25 degrees or so. And you could be plus minus 5 degrees in each of those specifications. The gist of it is, if you're trying to make a 3D print and you buy an animation sheet, you're not going to get a lot of depth. If you buy a sheet with a very high LPI value, like 100 LPI, it's not going to work well for flips with an inkjet printer. For 3D, you might get the tiniest little amount of depth. Some people have tried 75s, and they can do typically a 2 or 3 phase flip in a small print, maybe for a cell phone. But for general purposes, I would say if you're going to make letter size prints or bigger, I would try to stick with 40 LPI or lower. So you can get nice sheets in 40 LPI for either animation or 3D. And as you go lower in LPI, the sheets get thicker and thicker, and they can produce some really interesting results. In general, the lower the LPI, the thicker the sheet. The narrower viewing angle and the thicker the sheet and lower LPI, that's going to be better for 3D depth. As your sheets get thinner or your LPIs get higher, you're going to have less depth and a greater chance of ghosting. So if I was going to give a beginner one bit of advice, I would say start with a 40 LPI sheet, either an animation sheet or a 3D sheet, depending on whether you want to do flip and changing prints or if you want to do dimensional prints. All right, so the next common mistake is not using professional interlacing software. I know you can use Photoshop and you can make a mask and combine two pictures and make a flip. But I see people really get bogged down in the mechanics of that and the measuring and the, LPI divided by DPI, or I said that backwards, DPI divided by LPI. There's so much great free software these days, you may as well use it. There's Grape software that works on Mac or PC. There's Superflip software, an older program, but that's PC-based program, that's free. There's great commercial software like Triaxis 3D Master Kit or Framed Lives Lentigram. Master Kit's great for people doing three-dimensional work. The Lentigram, I think, is terrific for people that want to do flip work. So you can get either free software or paid software, but either of those choices, to me, is much better than just trying to use Photoshop and figure out how to, combine pictures with that. So the next common mistake has to do with printers and printing technology. When you buy an inkjet printer, they come with specifications indicating fantastic resolution, maybe 5760 by 1440 in the case of Epson, maybe 4800 by 1200 in the case of Canon or HP. You got to just ignore those numbers. These printers are driven with print drivers. They have nowhere near the resolution if you actually print out resolution test targets and look at them. If you're using an Epson printer, interlace your files at 720 ppi. If you're using a Canon or HP, interlace them at 600 ppi and just try to ignore all these other resolutions that they're throwing out at you. Now, that's not to say the resolution numbers are completely unimportant. You do want to know what you're doing when you're setting up your printer with the print driver. And I'm going to demonstrate that in just a moment. One other thing I would say is a common mistake beginners make is they set up their printer and they're printing borderless. And when you send data to a printer and have borderless turned on, that actually scales the image, so it becomes slightly bigger. That's detrimental to your lenticular technique, especially when you first start doing your pitch test. So make sure borderless is off. Now, if we can look at my screen here. So on screen right now is the Triaxis 3D Master Kit software. It has a number of features like one is really good for checking your printer. If we come over here to the pitch test setting, and this is the dialog you would use when you want to make a pitch test. But what I want to focus in is the bottom, of this dialog box. Here it says default printer, Epson Stylus Pro 4000, set up with a resolution of 300 pixels per inch. So the software is actually interrogating the printer to find out what resolution you can print at. Now, if we come over here to the change printer button, and we see the Epson stylus here, I could pick other printers. Here's one called the Parallels Shared Printer. I'm using the Parallels emulation software on this computer. Right now, the resolution is saying 600 pixels per inch. Well, I know that's not native to the Epson. That's absolutely wrong. 600 would be good for a Canon or HP. Epson wants 720. There's a mismatch in the driver settings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to print select the printer I'm using, the 4900. Then we're going to come over to the properties panel. And if you look at properties here, it's giving you a blow-by-blow description of how this is set up. Normally, I would set that up for a glossy paper. So that's what I'd be using. And the key here now is to come over and look at quality. There's choices: speed, quality, max quality, and quality options. If I just pick speed and I hit OK, now when we look at 3D Master Kit, it says 360 pixels per inch. All right, Same print driver. We'll come over here and we'll set it to quality. Hit OK. Still says 360 pixels per inch. Let's go check the print driver again. All right, here's an option, max quality. So let's hit that. Still 360 pixels per inch. Well, what's going on? Let's look at our quality options. So here we have choices. Fine, 720 by 720. When I move it up to 5, now we're at super photo, 2880 by 1440. We want to turn off high speed. We want to turn on finest detail. Hit OK. Hit OK. Hit OK. And now here we are. Resolution 720 pixels per inch. When I turned off high speed, what that's going to do is invoke unidirectional printing. When high speed is turned on, the head is printing when it travels in both directions. When high speed is turned off, it prints in one direction, the head returns to its starting point, it prints in the other direction. This actually improves the quality of your interlaced file. And then finest detail, that's what bumps us up to the 720 ppi input value. Otherwise, the software driver would be taking your higher resolution file, downsizing it to 360 pixels per inch, and it would be doing interpolation, which could be destructive to your file. If we have that finest detail turned on, it's expecting an input of 720 pixels per inch, and that'll pass right through to the printer. So having said that, let's say you are someone who sets up your files at 1,000 pixels per inch, and then you run it through with finest detail. Now it's going to do interpolation, taking that 1,000 ppi, downsizing it to 720 ppi, so that's not recommended, okay? Interlace your files, in the case of the Epson, at 720 ppi. So that's a quick look at this print driver setting in 3D MasterKit. Again, very useful because you might not know what your print driver is set at, but this allows you to test that. All right. So the next common mistake is rushing the pitch test. Now, what's the pitch test all about? You use your interlacing software, and most of them will generate a pitch test. I know Grape doesn't, but Grape, there's a companion program called fPitch, and that will generate a pitch test. Most of the pitch tests look something like this. They'll make a series of lines. Now, sometimes the lines are just going to be black and white. MasterKit allows you to do colored lines, and I really like this arrangement. It does a line of red, a line of white, a line of green, a line of white, and a line of blue, RGB, with white in between. And so this is an example of a pitch test. This is on 16 by 20 paper. Now what you're looking for is a solid band. So right now in this range, I can get it all solid. If I come closer, that's no longer correct, right? So now I have to go up to a higher value to get everything solid. So what this is telling you is the pitch test, where you determine the correct LPI to interlace, is sensitive to the viewing distance. You have a different pitch if you're very close compared to when you're very far away. So that's important. Sometimes people start out and they make a pitch test for a little 4x6 inch print, and then they go to make an 11x14 print, and the pitch is wrong, and they don't know, what am I doing wrong? You know, that's a common question. So you have to do a different pitch test for different viewing distances, which correspond to your sheet size. How do you determine the correct distance? Well, if you have a little handheld flip card, you basically measure from where you would hold that card to the viewer's eye. If you're doing a larger print, like a wall print, what I generally do is use a rule of thumb. Typically, the correct viewing distance is 1.5 to 2 times the diagonal of the print size. So in a print like this, if I get back far enough, 16 by 20, you would measure this diagonal. What dimension that would be, multiply it by 1.5 or 2, or if you want to average it, multiply it by 1.75, and that would give you the proper viewing distance. And then when you do your pitch test, you would view the sheet from that distance. Now, sometimes it's hard with the eye to determine that. What you can also do is go back to that viewing distance and just take your phone or digital camera and take a picture or take a video as you're moving, and then review those files and just see where you get the solid band that represents the correct pitch. All right, the pitch test, I can't stress enough, is very important. If you get that wrong, everything will fail going into the future. The pitch test I generally do to 2 decimal places. So like a 40 LPI sheet, maybe I'll test it and it'll be 39.98. If you want, you can test it to 3 decimal places. Unless you're making very small prints, I wouldn't go less than 2 decimal places. So the next thing is a beginner mistake, incorrect alignment of the lens to the print. This is something you don't want to rush. All these interlacing programs have the option of putting a registration border around the perimeter of the print. And usually what you do is you use the left edge of that border, and you make sure that your lenticular lenses or lenticules are lined up with the vertical interlaced lines. So that's the first step, get everything parallel. And the second step is to get everything centered. And there's usually a registration border on the top and bottom that have real precise marks that allow you to get that centered. So you want to get the lenticules first parallel to the interlaced lines, and then you want to get the print centered. And once you do that, you want to tack it in place. Once the print is made, it's very easy to see if you're out of registration by looking at the borders. And I commonly see people, beginners, make prints with no registration border, and then they say, what's going on with my picture? And they'll take a flip and they'll rotate it from side to side, and you see it transitioning at an angle. You can just see, they're not aligned at all. So you have to be lined up correctly to get this all to work out. So in review, have good realistic expectations of what you can do with a home inkjet printer. Purchase the correct lenticular sheet for your application, either an animation sheet or a 3D sheet. Use good software, either the free programs like Grape or Superflip, or commercial programs like Triaxis 3D Master Kit, Lentigram, Henry Clements Lenticulator. There's Imagium. There's a handful of these different programs. Make sure your printer settings are correct. Unidirectional mode, high resolution, meaning 720 ppi input, finest quality, high speed turned off. Make a pitch test. View your pitch test chart from the correct distance. Make your pitch test out to 2 decimal places. And then finally, when you make your print, take some time to do the alignment and get it right. So with that, I hope you enjoyed this video. Until next time, I'm Michael Brown. Hey, one last thing, if you could do me a favor, if you would like this video or subscribe to this channel, it helps me out. Take care.